How's it going? I'm Brandon Lee, and this video is going to be about my current favorite gear. So over the last year, I've tried out a lot of gear and I've picked a few as my favorites, and I'm going to talk about them in depth in this video: camera, gimbal, lenses, filters, accessories, things like that. And if you want to see an extended version of this video, check out my Film School Unscripted Studio. I will be posting it there. There's a link in the description of this video to find out more. By the way, this video is not sponsored by anyone. These are my own favorites. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. My current favorite camera is my Sony A7S III. It's not a new camera, I got it several years ago, but I still use it every single day because it's super compact and it just basically does everything that I need for run and gun filmmaking. First of all, it shoots really high quality 4K video with the full frame sensor. There's no crop at 60p, and there's very little crop at 120p. The camera has incredible low light performance. That's what the S in A7S means. That means no matter what situation I'm in, I can get a good image. It has very low rolling shutter, and that's extra important for me because I shoot with so much motion, so much action in my shots. I'm shooting handheld quite a bit. I'm shooting on a gimbal, moving around a lot. So I need as little rolling shutter as possible, especially when I post-stabilize my footage. Post-stabilization is really a pain if you have rolling shutter causing skew and warping in your image. I have to do quite a bit of post-stabilization because of all that movement in my shots, whether I'm using the built-in stabilizer in DaVinci Resolve or using the gyro stabilization that this camera offers. And by the way, that's another reason I love the A7S III. It records gyro data that I can then use to stabilize my shots in post. And that allows me to do super accurate post-stabilization that would be impossible with other cameras. Other reasons I'm still using this camera: it has this flip out screen, which is just right for me because I can look up at the screen, I can look down at the screen, and I can also flip the screen back in, flush against the camera body, so that if I'm filming on a gimbal, I can keep the system as compact as possible for the best performance. Believe it or not, it actually will affect the steadiness of the shot if the screen is flipped out like this and it's a windy day and the wind is blowing against your screen. So I really like to be able to just put the screen back like that and keep it compact. The battery life on the A7S III is improved over the older Sony cameras. I get about 2 hours per battery, which means that I can do a full day of shooting with about 4 batteries, maybe 5 at the absolute most. Whereas with older cameras, I was bringing a ridiculous number of batteries: 6 batteries, 7 batteries, sometimes even 8 or 9 batteries, depending on how heavy my day was. I love this smart hot shoe on the top of the camera, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, but you can add a number of accessories here and have them directly communicate with the camera. The internal recording formats of the A7S III are another reason why I continue to use this camera. It shoots really high quality XAVCS-I, all intra footage at up to 600 megabits per second, which means that you can basically shoot ProRes quality footage in a slightly more compressed format internally in the camera. So that means I don't have to worry about the image breaking up if I do color grading in post. And if I want to save disk space, I can also use XAVC-HS, which is the H.265 format recording. Basically, it's just a much smaller file, but has almost the same quality as the max quality format. So you still get really, really high quality footage with the XAVC-HS format and much smaller files. In fact, the file size of my 10-bit XAVC-HS footage is exactly the same as it was when I was shooting 8-bit on my old Sony cameras. That's only 100 megabits a second. That means I can fit a lot of footage on a single SD card. And fitting more footage into less cards is another way that I can keep my kit compact. I don't have to put SSDs or external recorders on top of my camera when I'm shooting. One thing not to be ignored is that this has an EVF, which I can use to check my focus while I'm shooting and also while I'm reviewing the footage afterward. And I don't have to rely on a punch-in magnification on the LCD screen. I can just look through that EVF and very quickly tell if my shot's perfectly in focus or not. And that is invaluable for me. I don't think I would ever want to use a camera that doesn't have a built-in EVF for that reason. I don't like to use external monitors or wireless transmitters if I can avoid them, just because it adds more bulk and more setup time and more batteries to my rig. Another great thing is the E-mount. Now, the E-mount's been around for a while, so maybe some of us have forgotten why it's so amazing. But what's really cool about the E-mount system is that you can mount almost any lens to it. You can take your old Nikon lenses, your Canon lenses, Leica lenses, any manual vintage lens from the last 100 years, and find some way to adapt it and mount it to these cameras, and then you can shoot with those lenses. This is not the case with every type of camera. Sony E-mount is kind of special because it has such a small flange distance, the distance between the lens and the sensor. it's a very small distance, which means that other systems that have larger flange distances can be adapted, and you can use those lenses on Sony cameras. So that's just a long way of saying Sony cameras are kind of special because you can adapt almost any lens to them. Other little things that are great, it's got a full-sized HDMI. It's got customizable keys all over the place so I can trigger things with buttons instead of having to go through menus. And it's weather resistant, so I've taken it to the deserts of Morocco, the beaches of Thailand, I've exposed it to humidity, I've exposed it to rain, I've exposed it to sand, and it still works just fine. So that weather resistance is extremely important for me because I'm always shooting outdoors in the real world. I'm not just in a studio. So that's why I love the A7S III. Here's a quick sample of what's in my new course, Fusion Filmmaking in Unscripted Studio. In one of the lessons, you'll see me shoot and edit a cocktail bar commercial. First, I do a whip pan on my gimbal. Then I switch to my 360 camera for a spinning overhead shot. Then I use my phone for a close-up of a martini glass with a smooth camera push-in. Then I switch again to a GoPro and I capture a fiery cocktail explosion. And I get additional angles from my 360 cam and my Sony A7S III. And then I put all these shots together seamlessly in DaVinci Resolve. Sound cool? There's 5 more lessons like it in Fusion Filmmaking. Click the link to learn more. Let's talk about my favorite gimbal. For the past several months, I've been using the DJI RS3 Mini, and that has been my go-to gimbal for most of my shoots because of its lightweight and because it basically has the same features as the RS3. I really liked the RS3, I just wanted a smaller version, and then DJI made one, so I use it. This gimbal is great for run and gun shoots where you're using a smaller camera like the A7S III. I'm very easily able to operate it with just one hand like I'm doing here. And because it doesn't fatigue my arm, I can go for my signature crazy camera angles and camera moves without feeling too much pain in my back. And that's what's really important to me as a shooter who uses gimbals every day. I need a rig that will allow me to express myself with my camera movement without feeling like the rig is weighing me down. So aside from all the features and all the technical stuff, I really just like the way this gimbal feels. I like the handle, it's just about the perfect size. I can grip it all day and it doesn't hurt my hand. I can also potentially control the focus if I'm using a follow focus with this wheel. I can use just one finger to rotate that wheel, and then that will control the focus of the lens if I have it properly attached. And that means that I can do follow focus with one hand instead of two. I don't have to do this with an external follow focus wheel. If I had to focus like this while operating the gimbal, then the focusing would throw off my gimbal moves. I wouldn't be able to move the gimbal as well. But being able to do it entirely one-handed is a lot easier for me. As you can see right here, it has an FPV mode, and this means that I can corkscrew the camera on the gimbal in any direction that I want, even going all the way around, upside down. And that's great for creative expression because then my camera moves can be as wild as my imagination. I can just come up with something crazy, run out and do it. It has other really advanced features like subject tracking and time-lapse, but I actually don't really use those features. I mostly just use it for stabilizing my cinematic walking shots. One final reason why this gimbal is really great for using handheld is that I am able to use it for selfies if I'm using a lightweight prime on my camera, and it's not too heavy in my hand. Now, realistically, I wouldn't want to walk around all day like this. This would get pretty tiring. But if I'm just doing a quick selfie shot in between cinematic B-roll shots, it's no problem. This gimbal doesn't have the advanced fancy locks of the RS3, but it still does have 3 axes that can be fully locked just like that. So when you turn off the gimbal, then the arms won't swing around. And that makes it a lot easier to hand carry it when I'm walking around and the gimbal's turned off. And it also makes it easier to balance it because then I can just unlock the axes one at a time and then balance them like that. Unlock this one and then balance it. It makes the balancing process a lot easier. And it has a quick release that's actually quick. I can very quickly go from gimbal to handheld. And then if I want to go back on a gimbal, it's quite easy to go back on a gimbal just like that. That's why I love the DJI RS3 Mini. Another gimbal that's quickly becoming one of my favorites is the Zhiyun Crane M3S. This is actually even a little bit smaller than the DJI RS3 Mini. The arms are a little bit smaller, the handle is just about the same. But if you're trying to go ultralight, ultra compact, this is the smallest gimbal that I would trust with a full frame camera. Again, it's painless to use because it is so lightweight, and it will hold my A7S III and a prime or a small zoom lens. I noticed that it won't quite balance if you're using a big stack of filters or a much longer lens. It's better with shorter lenses. But if you're looking for a gimbal to bring along on a trip, if you're looking for something to throw in a small backpack, basically if you just need the ultimate compact gimbal for your mirrorless camera, the Crane M3S does a great job. Let's talk about some lenses. Some of my current favorite lenses are the Samyang VAF Cine Primes. So these are a matched set of Cinema Prime lenses. I have 3 of them right now. They are all exactly the same size, exactly the same weight. They have focus gears built in, and best of all, they are all t1.9 or f1.8 aperture. Oh, and they have autofocus. They're autofocus lenses, not manual. For me, the really killer feature of these lenses is that they're exactly the same size, exactly the same weight. So if I have my camera on a gimbal, then I can switch out the lenses without rebalancing. Currently, I have the 24, I have the 35, and I also have the 75mm version of these lenses. There's a few more lenses in the set that you could get. There's a 45mm, 100mm, and 20mm upcoming. I'm really curious to see if Samyang can pull off the 20mm focal length and keep it t1.9 and exactly the same size and weight, because this is pretty small. Each lens has rear electronic contacts, of course, so it can communicate with the camera, but they also have front electronic contacts. These front electronic contacts mean that the lens can communicate with accessories on the front. The reason Samyang did this is because they have some accessories that can change the way the lenses behave. For instance, there's a manual focus adapter, which I have not tried yet, that if you screw it on the front, turns the lens into a true linear manual focus. No fly-by-wire at all. It's just true direct linear manual focus, which means that you'll be able to set focus marks and repeat them exactly as if you were using a full manual lens, and you won't have any of that fly-by-wire speed up, slow down reaction to your hand or your follow focus as you're turning the ring. There's also a rumored anamorphic adapter, so you may in the future be able to turn these into anamorphic lenses. I'm not sure exactly how that's going to work, but I'm certainly excited about it. So if you're looking for cinema lenses, but you don't want to give up your autofocus and you also want them to be a matched set that can be interchangeable when you're on a gimbal, then the Samyang Cine VAFs are definitely worth looking into. Another lens I want to talk about that definitely makes my list is the Viltrox 16mm f1.8 autofocus lens. I don't need to explain why that's cool. It's 16mm and it's f1.8 and it's still light and compact and it has autofocus. That means that I can shoot in low light with a really wide aperture and keep my subject in focus, which is great, once again, for gimbal shooting or for any kind of shooting that has a lot of camera movement. Not only is this lens wide, bright, and beautiful, it also has 2 function buttons on it, which means that you can focus pull from one point to another point while you're shooting just by pressing these buttons. So you can set point A close and then point B further, and you can switch between those 2 points just by pressing the button while you shoot. Now, this isn't going to be great if you're working on a gimbal because as far as I know, you can't reassign these functions to any buttons on your gimbal, so you'll have to actually like reach up and touch the lens, which would cause shake in your shot. But if you're shooting handheld, it's a great extra feature to have that I have never seen before on a lens. And I hope they come out with more lenses that have this feature. It also has an LCD screen on the top, which means that you can see your lens settings by looking down on the lens. That's great if you're shooting like this, the camera's at your chest, and you just want to double check all of the settings on your lens, or you want to see exactly where you're focused. It will tell you with that LCD screen. So that's the Viltrox AF 16mm f1.8 lens. Finally, a lens that's not new, but I still love it and I use it all the time, the Samyang AF 18mm f2.8. This is a super tiny full frame 18mm f2.8 lens, which means you can use it in pretty low light. It's 165 grams. That's so small and so light. It's like a GoPro basically. I think it's actually less than a GoPro in weight. So what that means is I can just drop it in my camera bag, leave it there all the time and not even worry about it taking up extra space or causing extra weight, and I have a wide angle with me anytime I need it. This lens is especially useful if you're shooting selfies and you want to keep your camera really lightweight, but you want to get nice and wide to show your whole scene and to be able to get your whole face in the frame at arm's length, and you want to be able to shoot in low light and knock that background out of focus. You can achieve all those objectives with this tiny little lens. So the Samyang 18mm AF f2.8 is a great one to keep in the bag whenever you go out shooting. That's what I do. Okay, now let's talk about lens filters. What you're seeing here is the Polarpro Helix Maglock system. These are interlocking magnetic filters that just snap onto the front of your lens and instantly attach, and then you can just as instantly detach them, and you can detach them from each other as well because they're magnetic. Now, what makes these special among magnetic filters is that locking mechanism. So instead of just clipping together and staying there through magnetic force, they actually lock, which means they won't come apart. So if you have your camera in your bag and everything's getting jostled around, or if you're filming in a crowd and people are bumping into you, you don't have to worry about your magnetic filter ever coming off. It just doesn't come off. It's locked into place. So that's really useful for me as a run and gun shooter who's out in the real world a lot. Once again, I don't really shoot in studios. So my gear needs to be bomb proof. It needs to be bang proof. It needs to be able to withstand the occasional bump against the wall or even sometimes being dropped on the ground. I have dropped these a few times and they're still kicking. They're looking just fine. And they are also easier to store because I can just stack up all the lenses together, and then I can put a lens cap on everything like this. And then I have all my lenses like this on top of my lens, and I drop that in my bag, and everything is kept nice and safe because there's the protection on the front from the lens cap, and then the lens itself protects them from the back. So that's a quick way that I store these Maglock lenses from Polarpro. So I've got a couple of variable ND filters. This is the 2 to 5 stop, and it has very little color cast. I like it a lot. There's also a 6 to 9 stop that has equally minimal color cast. They have this mist filter. So this adds just a little bit of bloom to the highlights of your shots and a little bit of softness to the skin in your shots. It's not so much that's noticeable all the time. It just sort of shows itself whenever you have a strong light source. So that's what I really like about this mist filter. It's just the right grade of mist so that I could leave it on pretty much all the time and it doesn't become distracting or it doesn't become annoying. It just looks good. It just softened out the image and it reduces that harsh digital clipping that you sometimes get with digital cameras. It makes it look a little bit more analog, a little bit more filmic. And I've got this Goldmorphic filter. I don't know if you can see, it's a little bit gold. It has gold lines across the filter, which create streaks in your image. So that means that you can get horizontal or diagonal or vertical flares in your image from any light source, and the flares will always be golden color. Now this is a very strong effect, and the way I like to use the Goldmorphic filter is if the source of light is either off frame or it's somewhat diffused. Because if I point it directly at the sun, it can be a little bit too intense for my taste. I like to use the Goldmorphic as a subtle touch when I'm filming a diffuse light source or a light source that's out of frame. And then it just adds a little bit of extra golden flare to my shot and makes it look a little bit more magical. So that's why I love these Polarpro Helix Maglock filters. Thanks, Peter McKinnon. Let's talk a little bit about audio. My current favorite wireless microphone kit is the DJI Mic. This is the type of mic that you're actually hearing right now. It's under my shirt as I speak. The reason I like the DJI Mic system is because it's been really reliable for me. It produces good quality sound, like you're hearing right now. It has high quality built-in internal recording, so you can also use it just as a voice recorder, or you can use it as a backup in case the wireless system cuts out. And it has a few ways of mounting on the subject. You can either clip it, it's got a built-in clip, or you can use the magnetic clip attachment, and then you can clip it to somebody's shirt, just like that. Now the mic is under my shirt. I've been using these DJI mics not just for filming myself for YouTube, but also for some narrative type shooting where I had two people in a dialogue scene. I just hid the mics under their clothes. These are really easy to hide because they're so small. And then I just let the characters talk and move around freely, and I didn't have to worry about a boom operator or a lavalier mic with a tangled cable or a visible antenna that could easily get snapped or broken. With this system, there's just one piece to worry about and there's no cables on the mic.
Film can at any time be messed up, so that's why I shoot both digital and film.
Okay, so you can have any accent in the world. What would you have?
An Irish accent.
An Irish accent.
Yeah,
it's a good choice.
I love an Irish accent.
Me too.
So once again, I'm a run and gun shooter. I like to keep things as minimal as possible, as hassle-free as possible, so that I don't need extra crew or extra gear in order to get the shots that I want. So the DJI mic really fits the bill for that. They've been reliable for me in the field when I just need to get the audio quick. Here's another microphone that I love. It's Sony's Mini shotgun mic, and you mount it on the hot shoe of your camera, just like that. at the darkest time of the year. There's actually only a few hours of daylight each day while we're here, so we have to make the most of it.
And so his breed, they have for centuries pulled people through, well, snowy countries.
So what I love about this mic over other shotgun mics is that it connects without any cables at all, and it doesn't need to draw battery power from an external battery. And that takes away two of my main concerns when I'm shooting: having a properly connected cable and making sure there's battery power to the mic. Also, it automatically turns on the moment that you connect it, and it automatically sets its own level as you shoot. It has really, really good automatic gain control without any annoying pumping sounds as it rides the gain. So I get very natural sounding audio that never clips because it automatically adjusts as I'm shooting, and I don't have to worry about accidentally leaving the power off because it turns itself automatically as soon as it's connected. So if you're a shooter who needs an on-camera mic, but you're doing a lot of unmonitored audio recording, which means that you're not always connected with headphones to your camera listening to the audio as you shoot, this is probably the best type of mic that you can choose for your Sony camera because it removes all those potential points of failure. Dead battery, power off, cable disconnected, damaged cable, damaged port on your camera, improper volume settings. You won't have any of those concerns. It just works. And that's why I love it. Let's talk about a few lights that I love. I am a run and gun shooter, so I usually don't do a lot of complex lighting, but one light in particular that really caught my eye this year is the Zhiyun Molus X100, which I'm holding right now in my hand. This is not a camera, this is actually a light. And it is 100 watts of LED power. It's also color temperature switchable, so I can go from 2700K to daylight color on up to 6500K and anything in between with this little dial knob on the side. But the main reason that I love this light is because of the form factor. No other light on the market looks like this and has this much power. It's super blade thin, just like the body of a mirrorless camera, and it has a battery right where you would want to grip a camera. So holding it, it really feels like I'm operating a camera, but I'm actually holding a light. And that makes it really comfortable to hand hold and bring around as I'm shooting. It has an internal fan that keeps it cool, and it also has a mount right there where you can put accessories in front of the light. You can either use the ZY mount, which is their proprietary mount, or you can adapt it to Bowen's. So you could use your existing softbox or your other accessories with this light. So that's why I love the Molus X100 from Zhiyun. And finally, a light that I haven't had as much time to play around with, but it's quickly becoming one of my favorites, is the Zhiyun Molus G200. So this is a light that's more suited for studio use because it is cabled and you do have to plug it into the wall. This is an AC powered light that has two pieces. It has the light itself and then a small controller box, which is a pretty common style of build for studio lights. Now the reason this light is awesome is because it's got 200 watts of power, it's twice the power of the X100, and it's still really slim. It's still really small and slim. And that means that you can mount it in small places, or it's easy to place it overhead because it doesn't weigh very much. You can easily stick it to the ceiling somehow or hang it from a pipe, something like that. Or you can slot it into a small space. Like let's say you're trying to put it outside a window, but you don't have much space between your building and the next building. Well, you don't have to worry about the depth of the light taking up any space. The light itself is extremely slim. And it does have an external controller box. It's not all one piece. This is how you control the CCT and the dimming of the light. But this controller box is very minimal. It hardly weighs anything. It's really small. So with these two pieces put together, you still have a really compact 200 watt LED lighting system. Oh, and in case I forgot to mention, it is 2700 to 6500K by color. And finally, it is Bowen's mount. So you can use all your familiar accessories on the front of your light, such as softboxes, reflectors, etc. They will all work just fine. Okay, so those are some of my favorite gear picks for the year so far. Once again, if you want to see the extended version, check out the link in the description to my Film School Unscripted Studio. And also in the comments, tell me, what is your favorite gear that you're using and why? So I'm Brandon Lee, thanks for watching. Please click like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you know the next time I post a video. I'll see you next time. And before I go, I just want to remind you to check out my new course, Fusion Filmmaking in Unscripted Studio, where you'll learn to seamlessly mix all your cameras together in your videos. Click the link in the description to learn more.